I still remember the sound of her voice that morning, cold, polite, rehearsed, like a customer service call. "Grandpa, please don't come to my wedding." Just like that. No pause, no tremor, like she was canceling a subscription. "My name's Tom Walker, and I've been called a lot of things in 74 years. Stubborn, proud, old-fashioned, but never unwanted, until that call." The air went out of the kitchen as she spoke. The kettle was still whistling on the stove, and for a second I couldn't tell if the ringing in my ears came from that or from her words. "It's not personal, Grandpa. It's just, well, Ethan's family is very particular about appearances." Appearances. That word hit harder than any insult could. I'd spent my life fighting to build something out of nothing, raising her after the accident, working nights at the mill so she could go to college, selling the farm so she'd never have to worry about tuition. And now she was embarrassed by how I looked in a thrift store suit. I didn't argue, just said, "If that's what you want, sweetheart," and hung up before my voice could crack. For a long while I just sat there at the table, staring at the mug in front of me. The same mug I'd used every morning for 50 years, chipped on the handle where her grandmother used to tap her spoon. That little sound had been the rhythm of our mornings before cancer took her. After she died, it was just me and Emily. She was 6 then, tiny, wide-eyed, always asking if heaven had good pancakes. I built her world from routine: pancakes on Sundays, old movies on Fridays, walks by the river when the weather was kind. I never remarried. She was enough. And now, somehow, I was too much. Outside, the wind shook the dry maple leaves along the driveway. The house felt emptier than usual. I thought about calling her back, asking what I'd done wrong, but pride is a funny thing. It holds you upright even when it's breaking your heart. So instead, I poured another cup of coffee, turned the radio on low, and listened to the static. Later that day, her wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Thick white envelope, gold lettering, the kind that smells faintly of perfume and money. "Dr. and Mrs. Ethan Caldwell request the honor of your presence." Except they didn't. Not really. The RSVP card was already marked declined. She'd filled it out for me. All I had to do was sign. I turned it over in my hands and saw the small handwritten note she'd added at the bottom. "Please understand, Grandpa. It's complicated. I love you. Complicated. Love you." 2 words that never should have lived in the same sentence. That night, I pulled out the old photo box from the closet. It was the one she used to beg to look through when she was a kid. Inside were pictures of her mother, my daughter Claire, and of me when I still had both knees that worked and a back that didn't creak like a porch step. Emily's baby photos were there too. Her first tooth, her first bike, the day she graduated. Every milestone I'd stood in the crowd clapping for, invisible to everyone but her. Beneath those photos, under a layer of yellowed newspaper, were papers she'd never seen, documents, receipts, and one letter her grandmother wrote before she died. I'd kept it sealed all these years. It wasn't just a love letter, it was a truth I'd been saving for Emily. For when she was old enough to understand what family really meant. Now, it seemed, that time had come. The next morning, I drove into town. The air smelled like rain and diesel, that mix you only get near the hardware store. I parked outside the jeweler's. Inside, the young clerk looked up from her counter and smiled. "Can I help you find something, sir?" "I need a wedding gift," I said. My voice felt steadier than I expected. "Something simple, honest." She showed me rings, bracelets, crystal vases, all shining, expensive, soulless. I shook my head. "No, something that'll last." She hesitated, then brought out a small wooden box. Handmade, polished smooth, no lock, no key. "Local craftsman," she said. "Walnut. It's meant for keepsakes." I ran my thumb over the grain. It felt warm, real. "I'll take it." At home, I placed inside that box a few things. The photo of Emily on her 5th birthday, chocolate frosting on her nose, the seashell she'd found on our last trip to the lake, her grandmother's wedding ring, and finally, that sealed letter. Then I added one more thing, a copy of the deed to the house she thought I'd sold years ago. Because while she was off building a life in the city, I'd been quietly rebuilding the one she left behind. Every mortgage payment, every tax bill, every repair, paid in full. The title was still in my name, but it carried a clause she didn't know about. The Walker Foundation Trust, established 12 years ago, named Emily Walker as its sole beneficiary. On her wedding day, it would transfer ownership of this land, the mill shares, and the remaining savings account, everything her grandmother and I built. But there was one condition: it could only be activated by family acknowledgement, a signature, a handshake, a spoken acceptance that she was proud to be a Walker. If she couldn't even invite her own grandfather to her wedding, what did that make her? By evening, I'd wrapped the box in brown paper, tied it with twine, and wrote her name in careful handwriting. No card, no explanation. Just a note tucked under the string. For when appearances fade. I didn't plan on revenge. I'm too old for that. But I do believe in lessons, the kind life gives you when you forget where you came from. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you. 3 days later, I got a voicemail from her Aunt Carol. Her voice trembled. "Tom, are you sitting down? Something happened at the wedding. You'd better turn on Channel 7. I did. And there, on the evening news, was my granddaughter in her white dress, makeup streaked with tears, bouquet dropped on the marble floor. The anchor's voice was calm, professional. A shocking interruption at the Caldwell wedding today, after the bride opened a mysterious package that stopped the ceremony moments before the vows. My hands shook as I turned up the volume, because I knew exactly what was in that box, and I knew this wasn't over yet. The reporter's voice faded as the footage rolled, chaos in slow motion. Guests standing, whispers rippling through the crowd, the groom's mother clutching her pearls like someone had fired a gun, and in the center of it all, Emily, my granddaughter, holding that little walnut box like it was something dangerous. The lid open, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. I could tell she'd just read the letter. I turned off the TV. I didn't need to see the rest. I knew every word that letter contained. After all, I'd written it with my wife, Mary, a lifetime ago. She'd made me promise I'd only pass it on when Emily forgot who she was. It wasn't a scolding, not even a warning. It was a story, the real one. How Mary and I built our lives from nothing. How we'd kept the farm through drought and debt. How we'd buried our daughter and still got up every morning to raise her little girl. It ended with Mary's handwriting, looping and graceful, even after chemo had taken most of her strength. Never be ashamed of your roots, Emmy. They're the reason you can reach anything at all. The news said the wedding had been postponed indefinitely. That's journalist talk for disaster. The next morning, I went out to the porch with my coffee and waited. I wasn't sure for what. Maybe a call, maybe nothing at all. The sun was warm on my hands, the kind of gentle morning that makes you think the world's forgiving, even when it isn't. Around 10, I heard gravel crunching in the driveway. A black sedan, too shiny, too new for this old road. Emily stepped out. Her dress was gone, replaced by jeans and a plain sweater, but she looked smaller somehow, lighter, like the air had been knocked out of her and never came back. "Grandpa," she said, standing at the edge of the steps. "Morning," I said quietly. "You hungry? There's coffee." She nodded but didn't move. Her eyes were red. "They all left," she whispered. "Ethan, his family, everyone, after the letter." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Sit. Tell me what happened." She did slowly, like each word weighed a ton. The wedding had been perfect, or at least looked perfect. Marble floors, white roses, a string quartet. She'd walked down the aisle feeling like she'd won life's final prize. But when the officiant asked for the rings, her maid of honor handed her the package instead. "I thought it was from one of my friends," she said. "Something sentimental, you know, a joke or a memory. But when I saw your handwriting..." She stopped, staring at her hands. I opened it. I read the letter out loud without thinking. I didn't even notice everyone watching. And then, Ethan took it from me. He said, she swallowed hard. He said his family couldn't be tied to charity cases, that marrying into a legacy like that would complicate public image. I felt my jaw tighten. A legacy like what? The trust fund, the clause, everything Grandma left. He thought it was fake at first, some kind of emotional manipulation. His father called it a farm fairy tale. "And you?" I asked. She looked up, tears trembling at the edges of her eyes. I told them it wasn't fake. I told them it was real, that you'd built it, that we had built it. But it was too late. He walked out. I said nothing. Just watched the wind tug at the porch curtains. She sniffed and tried to laugh. You must think I got what I deserved. I think life has a way of giving people what they need, I said, even if it hurts like hell. For a long while we sat in silence, the only sound the creak of the rocking chair and the faint hum of bees around the old lilac bush. I was ashamed, she finally whispered, of you, of this house, of how we lived. I thought if I could just fit into his world, I could forget where I came from. I nodded. And did it work? She shook her head, eyes filling again. No. The more I tried, the emptier I felt. Grandpa, I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked on the word sorry. It wasn't the kind of apology that fixes things. It was the kind that cracks something open inside you and lets the truth in. I reached over, patted her hand. Mary used to say we all forget ourselves sometimes. The trick is finding the way back. She smiled weakly. How do I do that? You start by eating breakfast, I said. Can't make good choices on an empty stomach. She laughed just a little. You're still impossible. Consistent, I corrected. We ate in the kitchen like old times. I made pancakes, the way I used to when she was small, burned edges and all. She sat there watching me flip them, like she couldn't believe something that simple could still exist. When she finally took a bite, her shoulders dropped, tension melting off her. Afterward, she helped me wash the dishes, and when she thought I wasn't looking, she glanced around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. The photo of her mother on the mantel, the worn Bible on the shelf, the faded curtains her grandmother had sewn by hand. I forgot how small it is, she said softly. Yeah, I said. Funny how small things hold so much. Her eyes filled again, but this time it wasn't guilt. It was something like relief. Can I stay a few days? She asked, just until I figure things out. Of course, I said. This house has never turned you away. That night, as the crickets started singing and the porch light flickered, she came out holding the box again. I didn't finish reading it earlier, she said. There was something at the end. She unfolded the letter carefully, her hands trembling. It says there's a second envelope, she murmured, looking up. Grandma wrote that it was meant for me after the wedding. I frowned. After? Emily reached into the box again and pulled out a smaller envelope sealed with red wax. She handed it to me. I think she wanted us to read it together. The wax cracked under my thumb, the sound sharp in the quiet night. Inside was a single page, Mary's handwriting again. If you're reading this, it means life didn't go the way you planned, but maybe the way you needed. Tom, tell her the truth. It's time she knew about the farm, and about what we left buried beneath the maple tree. I looked up slowly. Emily's eyes widened. Buried? I nodded, heart pounding in my chest. Your grandmother never did anything halfway. And right then, I knew the story wasn't over. It was just beginning again, where the roots ran deep and secrets waited quietly under the soil, waiting to be found. We stood under the porch light, that letter shaking in my hand like a leaf in the wind. Buried beneath the maple tree, Emily whispered, her eyes wide. I nodded slowly. Your grandma never wrote things she didn't mean. It was late, past 10, but the thought of that secret sitting in the dark ground just a few yards from us made it impossible to wait. So we grabbed the old flashlight from the kitchen drawer, the one with tape around the handle, and stepped out into the night. The air smelled like rain and cut grass, the kind of scent that drags 1,000 memories behind it. That maple tree had been our everything, our summer shade, our autumn playground, the place where Emily learned to ride her bike. It had been Mary's favorite spot in the world. We buried her wedding ring under that tree when she died. Emily crouched beside the trunk, running her hand over the rough bark. Are you sure it's okay? She asked. It's her note, I said quietly. We do what she asks. The soil was soft from the morning rain. I found the old shovel leaning against the shed and began to dig. Every scoop felt like peeling back time. Emily knelt beside me, hands dirty, breath shallow. We didn't speak much. The night had its own kind of silence, the kind that asks you to listen. Then the metal hit something solid, a dull thud. Emily gasped. "What is that?" I crouched down and brushed away the dirt. A small metal box, rusted at the corners but still whole. The same kind Mary used to keep her recipe cards in. I lifted it gently, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "Go ahead," I told her. She opened the latch with trembling fingers. Inside were papers, some yellowed with age, others newer. On top lay a photograph, Mary and me on our wedding day, 1959, smiling like fools. Underneath it, another envelope, this one labeled in Mary's handwriting, for Tom and Emmy. When truth can heal more than it hurts. Emily's breath caught. "Do you want to open it?" I nodded, though part of me was afraid. Some truths, once spoken, don't go back in the box. Inside were several pages. The first was a letter, dated 15 years ago. "Tom," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it long enough to say it myself. You remember the storm of '85, the one that nearly took the barn? That's when we found the old documents. The land title wasn't what we thought." I frowned, reading on. "Turns out, your grandfather bought this property with shares in the mill, not cash. And those shares were never cashed out. They still exist, tied to the land. When the mill was sold in 1997, the ownership records were a mess, and they never traced that small portion. It's worth more than either of us ever guessed." Emily looked up sharply. "Wait, are you saying we own part of the mill?" "Not part," I said, heart pounding. "Maybe more than that." Mary's letter continued. I kept the papers hidden because I wanted Emily to grow up without thinking about money, to understand that worth comes from work, not inheritance. But if life ever tries to make her feel small, show her this. Let her see that her roots are strong, that everything she's been ashamed of is actually her legacy. Tucked behind the letter were the documents, official certificates, notarized in faded ink, proving it all. The Walker estate owned 12% of Ridge Valley Mill Industries. I'd spent my life working there, never realizing I was working for something that was partly mine. Emily covered her mouth. "Grandpa, this is huge." I nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was many things. Modest wasn't one of them." We sat there in the dirt for a long time, the moonlight catching the edges of those papers like silver. Finally, Emily whispered, "Ethan's family called us. Charity cases." "Let them," I said. "They measure worth in money. We measure it in truth." When we came back inside, Emily washed her hands and stared at her reflection in the kitchen window. "I don't think I even recognized the person I was last week," she said. "All those parties, the designer dress fittings, pretending I didn't have a grandfather who fixed his own truck. I thought I was climbing up when I was actually walking away." I poured 2 cups of tea and handed her one. "You can't blame yourself for wanting a better life," I said. "You just forgot you already had one." She smiled faintly, eyes red but alive again. "Grandpa, do you think Grandma planned this? All of it?" I chuckled. "Mary Walker didn't do coincidence. She probably wrote that letter knowing it'd land exactly where it needed to." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window while the house creaked in the wind and thought about the irony of it all, how one woman's wisdom and one girl's mistake had brought us right back to the beginning. Maybe that's how healing works. It doesn't erase what broke you. It just brings you home. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the phone ringing. Emily answered, her voice quiet. Then she handed it to me. "It's a lawyer," she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "Whose lawyer?" "Ethan's father," she said, biting her lip. I hesitated, then took the call. "Tom Walker speaking." A smooth, practiced voice came through the line. "Mr. Walker, this is Daniel Caldwell. I believe there's been some misunderstanding regarding your family's assets. I'd like to discuss an arrangement." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words hang in the air. "An arrangement?" "Yes." "Well, it seems the documents you sent to the wedding," I could almost hear him grimace, "indicate your family may hold certain historical claims on the Ridge Valley property. I represent the current board, and we'd prefer to resolve this quietly." Emily's eyes met mine. "They want to buy us out," she mouthed. I smiled slowly. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "You threw my granddaughter out of her own wedding because you thought she wasn't good enough. Now you want to negotiate?" A pause. "Mr. Walker, I assure you, this is strictly business." "So was my mill work for 40 years," I said. Funny how business changes when the paperwork finally catches up. He cleared his throat. Perhaps we can meet. Tomorrow, my office, noon? I hesitated, then said, I'll think about it, and hung up. Emily stared at me. Are you really going? I looked at the papers spread out on the table, the faded signatures, the proof of everything we'd been. Oh, I'm going, I said, but not to sell anything. Her brow furrowed. Then why? Because some lessons, I said, standing up, need to be taught face to face. Outside, the sun was rising over the maple tree, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like the world was on our side. The next morning, I woke before dawn, the way I always had when I worked the early shifts at the mill. My bones still remembered those years. The whistle at 6, the clang of machinery, the taste of iron dust in the air. But that morning, there was something different in the rhythm of the day. Purpose. Emily was already in the kitchen, hair tied back, wearing one of Mary's old flannel shirts. She looked tired but steady. You're really going to that meeting? She asked. Wouldn't miss it, I said, pouring coffee. Man invites you to his office after insulting your bloodline. You don't send an email back. You look him in the eye. She smiled faintly. You sound like Grandma. I'll take that as a compliment. We drove into town in my old pickup, the one Emily used to call Rusty Rocket when she was little. The dashboard rattled, the heater groaned, but she didn't complain this time. She just stared out the window, quiet, like she was relearning what real felt like. Caldwell and Finch attorneys occupied the top floor of a new glass building that had replaced an old hardware store. Money and arrogance smelled the same in places like that. Too much polish, not enough soul. We stepped into the lobby and Emily hesitated. Maybe I shouldn't go in, she whispered. It's your name on the papers. It's your legacy too, I said. You're coming. The receptionist blinked when I said our names. Mr. Walker, 1 moment, please. She made a quick call, whispered something, and within a minute, a tall man in a navy suit appeared. His handshake was soft, practiced. Mr. Walker, he said smoothly. Daniel Caldwell, thank you for agreeing to meet. He turned to Emily. And you must be... My granddaughter, I said. The one your son left standing at the altar. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Discomfort, maybe guilt, but he hid it well. Please, he said, gesturing toward a glass-walled conference room. Let's talk. The table looked like something out of a magazine. Glossy mahogany, bottled water, little silver pens arranged like soldiers. Caldwell sat opposite us, papers already neatly stacked. I understand there's been confusion, he began. The documents you presented appear authentic, though somewhat outdated. They're more than authentic, I said. They're certified and notarized. That mill stands on land my grandfather paid for with shares your predecessors never cleared. Caldwell adjusted his cufflinks. Be that as it may, Ridge Valley Industries has changed ownership multiple times since then. Any claim you hold is likely symbolic. Symbolic, I repeated. That's a polite word for inconvenient, isn't it? He smiled tightly. Let me be frank, Mr. Walker. Our board is prepared to offer a settlement in recognition of your family's contribution to the company's history. A goodwill gesture. Emily frowned. How much of a gesture? He slid a paper across the table. I glanced at the number, a 6-figure offer. To most people, it would have looked generous. To me, it was hush money. I leaned back. You know, Mr. Caldwell, when I worked at that mill, I used to sweep the floors at night. Back then, I thought I was lucky just to have a job. Funny thing, though, the dirt always comes back if you don't clean the foundation. He blinked. Excuse me? I'm not taking your money, I said. I'm reclaiming what's ours. Mr. Walker, this could become complicated. Litigation, publicity. Publicity, I interrupted. You mean the kind where people learn that the mighty Ridge Valley Company has been profiting off unclaimed family shares for decades? His jaw tightened. That would be unfortunate for everyone. Maybe. But the truth usually is. Emily shifted beside me, nervous but proud. I could feel her strength building again. She'd been humiliated in front of hundreds, but right now she looked more like a walker than she ever had. Caldwell sighed, gathering his papers. You realize, Mr. Walker, that if you pursue this, it could take years. Lawyers, court fees, no guarantees. I've waited 74 years to be heard, I said. What's a few more? We stood to leave, but before we reached the door, he called after me. Out of curiosity, he said, why send that box to your granddaughter's wedding? Why embarrass her like that? I turned slowly. I didn't embarrass her. I reminded her who she was. The shame was borrowed. She just finally gave it back. His face colored slightly, but he didn't respond. Outside, the cold wind cut through our coats as we reached the truck. Emily let out a long breath she'd been holding. You didn't even flinch, she said, half in awe. I've been dealing with men like him my whole life, I said. They measure respect in dollar signs. I measure it in sleep. I'll rest easy tonight. As we pulled out of the parking lot, she looked down at the envelope on her lap. Mary's old letter, now folded neatly inside a plastic sleeve. What happens now, Grandpa? We fight smart, I said. I've still got friends who work that mill, folks who remember the stories. We'll prove the claim. She smiled faintly. You sound alive again. I laughed softly. Maybe I am. The next week was a blur of phone calls, notarized copies, and old friendships rekindled. Men I hadn't seen in 30 years started showing up at my door. Joe Simmons, who ran the press line, Arthur Briggs, who used to handle payroll, even old Miguel from maintenance, who still had boxes of records in his garage. Piece by piece, the story came together. The Walkers had never been just laborers. We'd been silent partners, forgotten because we didn't shout loud enough. One night, Emily and I sat by the fire going through a stack of papers. She looked up suddenly. Grandpa, she said, do you ever wish you just kept it simple? Let them think what they want. I stared into the fire. Maybe when I was younger, but I'm too old to let lies write my family's history. She nodded, eyes glimmering in the firelight. I want to help, she said. I'm done hiding from who I am. And right then, I saw her mother's strength flicker in her face, the same stubborn light that had once driven me crazy and saved me more times than I could count. But the peace didn't last. 2 days later, a black envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, cold, impersonal. Notice of intent to litigate. Any public disclosure of confidential company materials will result in immediate legal action. Emily looked up from reading it. They're threatening us? I smiled grimly. Good, means they're scared. She frowned. What are you going to do? I took the letter, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the fire. Exactly what your grandmother told us to do, I said. Finish what she started. Outside, thunder rumbled over the hills, and the old maple swayed against the wind. It felt like Mary was listening, maybe even smiling. The storm rolled in that night, the kind that made the windows hum and the gutters moan. I couldn't sleep, not with lightning flashing every few seconds and my mind racing faster than the wind. Emily had gone to bed hours earlier, but I could hear her pacing upstairs. It was the same restlessness I used to see in her mother before a big decision. A quiet storm inside a quiet girl. By morning, the air smelled like wet earth and change. Emily came down the stairs, clutching her phone. Grandpa, she said, her voice trembling but steady. I think you need to see this. She handed me the screen. There it was, a news article on the local business site. Walker family dispute threatens Ridge Valley's reputation. Someone had leaked the story. I scrolled, reading each line carefully. They'd twisted everything. Called it a fabricated inheritance claim, said I was a disgruntled former employee, and that Emily had attempted to extort her former fiancé's family. Extort, I muttered. That's a pretty word for truth they can't control. Emily sat down, shaking her head. They're destroying us, Grandpa. People are commenting, saying I made the whole thing up for attention. Ethan's family must have fed them all of this. I looked at her, her face pale but burning with something fierce underneath. You're not a victim, Emily, I said softly. You're a walker. They can't erase that with headlines. She swallowed hard. Then let's fight back. I smiled slowly. That's my girl. We started with the truth. We gathered the old mill photos, payroll logs, and copies of contracts the company thought were long forgotten. Miguel still had the employee rosters from the 80s. hand-typed sheets with signatures and dates that match the share documents. Joe Simmons sent us photocopies of old ledgers from his attic. Every page added weight to our story. Every memory another nail in their coffin of lies. But truth needs a voice, and mine, after decades of silence, was ready. Emily called a journalist she knew from college, a small-town reporter named Lisa Tanner who wrote human interest stories, not corporate fluff. We met her at the diner on Main Street 2 days later. She had bright eyes and a notepad that looked like it had seen too much truth already. "I don't care about lawsuits," Lisa said, leaning forward. "I care about people being silenced. You've got proof?" Emily opened the folder we'd prepared. "We have everything," she said. "Documents, witnesses, even the notarized trust records." Lisa whistled low. "They tried to bury this?" "Along with our name," I said. "But we've been digging things up lately." She grinned. "Then let's get dirty." That interview changed everything. She published the article 3 days later under the headline, "The Forgotten Partners: How a Mill Worker's Family Held the Key to Ridge Valley's Hidden Fortune." It spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. By noon, the story had hit local radio. By evening, the state paper picked it up. By the next day, national outlets were calling. My phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, even former mill workers I hadn't heard from in 30 years. They all said the same thing. About time someone told the truth. But the Caldwells didn't take it quietly. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you. The following week, their lawyers sent another letter. Thicker, angrier, defamation, breach of confidentiality, damages exceeding $10 million. I read it twice, then poured myself a cup of coffee and set it next to Mary's old Bible on the table. $10 million, I said aloud. That's how much they think silence costs. Emily crossed her arms. "They're trying to scare us." "Good," I said. "Fear makes people careless." That evening, just as the sun was melting behind the trees, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. I knew that sound, the hum of money. Caldwell stepped out, same suit, same smile, but this time he looked tired. "Mr. Walker," he said, stopping at the porch steps. "May we speak privately?" Emily stood beside me, arms folded. "If you've got something to say it to both of us." He hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." He took a deep breath, the kind people take before they say something that costs them pride. "The board has agreed to a new offer," he began. "Full acknowledgement of the Walker shareholding, retroactive dividends, a public apology, in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement, and full transfer of rights back to the company." I stared at him. "You're offering us what's already ours, then asking us to give it back." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "You'll be wealthy beyond anything you could imagine." I glanced at Emily. Her eyes were steady, her chin lifted. "You think this is about money?" she asked. "You humiliated my grandfather, destroyed our names, and now you want to buy our silence." He tried to smile, but it faltered. "Miss Walker, I respect your principles, but this is the real world." I leaned forward. "In my real world, we built that mill with sweat, not signatures. My wife buried her dreams under that maple tree so her granddaughter could grow something better. You think we'll trade that for a check?" Caldwell's composure cracked for the first time. "Then what do you want?" "The truth," I said. "Publicly. You call a press conference. You tell the world the Walkers built Ridge Valley as much as any Caldwell ever did. You say my wife's name out loud, and you mean it." He blinked. "That's impossible." "Then we go to court," Emily said. "And this time, everyone will know who buried what." For a long moment, he just stood there, the weight of his family's empire pressing on his shoulders. Finally, he nodded once, curt and resigned. "You'll have our answer in 48 hours. He turned and walked away, his polished shoes sinking slightly in the soft dirt of the driveway. It made me smile. There's justice in seeing a rich man stumble on the land he tried to buy. That night, Emily sat on the porch swing, the crickets singing loud in the grass. "Do you think he'll do it?" she asked. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Maybe, maybe not. But one way or another, the truth's out now. That's what your grandmother wanted." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I wish she could see this." "She can," I said quietly. Every wind through those maple leaves is her saying she told us so. The stars blinked awake above us, and for the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Peace, wrapped up with a little bit of pride. But the peace didn't last long. Because the next morning, as I stepped outside to fetch the newspaper, there was another envelope waiting on the porch. Not black this time, white, crisp, elegant. Inside, a single handwritten note, Mr. Walker. There will be no apology, but perhaps you should know the truth about your granddaughter's fiancé. Meet me tomorrow, noon, at Ridge Valley's old mill office. Come alone, no signature. Just a faint trace of expensive cologne and something darker underneath. I looked up at the horizon, where the mill's chimney still rose like a scar against the morning sky. So, it wasn't over yet. I didn't tell Emily about the note, not right away. She'd already carried enough heartbreak on her shoulders to last a lifetime. And if what I suspected was true, this meeting wasn't about business. It was personal. The next day the sky was gray, low and heavy, the kind that feels like the world's holding its breath. I drove alone, my old pickup coughing down the back roads that led to Ridge Valley Mill. The factory had been shut down for years, but I still knew every turn, every dented fence post. It was where I'd given half my life, and where, apparently, the truth was waiting. The gates were open when I arrived. A black car stood parked near the main entrance, engine idling. Daniel Caldwell stepped out, umbrella in one hand, leather folder in the other. His face was calm, too calm. "Mr. Walker," he greeted me. "You came. Your note said I should." He gestured toward the building. "Inside, please." The place smelled like rust and memory. Dust hung in the air like ghosts of every man who'd ever worked there. The echo of our boots followed us down the corridor until we reached the manager's old office, the one with the big window overlooking the empty production floor. Caldwell shut the door softly behind us. "Before we start, I want to make it clear. This isn't official business." "Good," I said. "I don't do well with officials." He sighed, set the folder down on the desk. "This is about Ethan, about your granddaughter's fiancé." I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. "Go on." He hesitated, like a man deciding how much of the truth he could stand to say. "Ethan made mistakes," he said finally. "Serious ones. My family wanted to keep them quiet. That's partly why the wedding was so delicate." "What kind of mistakes?" Caldwell opened the folder. Inside were printouts, bank statements, wire transfers, emails. He'd been using company funds. Nearly $200,000 misappropriated under his name. Gambling debts, mostly. When your granddaughter's inheritance surfaced, Ethan saw an opportunity, a way out. Marrying her wasn't love. It was strategy. My stomach turned cold. "His mother knew," Caldwell continued. "We all did. We hoped marriage might straighten him out. Clearly it didn't. I looked at the papers, the evidence of greed dressed up as romance. Why show me this now? Because," he said quietly, "the truth has a way of bleeding into everything, and despite what you may think, not all of us wanted to destroy your family's name. Ethan's gone, disappeared last night, took what was left of his trust fund and vanished. But the damage he caused might come back to you." I studied his face. The arrogance was gone. He looked older, worn down by his own lies. "So this is guilt talking?" I asked. "Call it whatever you want," he said. "But if you go public again, this will surface. They'll twist it to make your granddaughter complicit. Better to know first." I picked up the papers and thumbed through them, each page heavier than the last. "You're giving me ammunition," I said. "I'm giving you closure," Caldwell replied. "You wanted truth. Now you have it." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind whistling through the cracked window. Then I folded the papers, tucked them under my arm, and walked toward the door. "Mr. Caldwell," I said, pausing, "you think you're doing me a favor, but you're really just trying to clean your conscience." He didn't deny it. "Maybe," he said softly, "but sometimes that's the only kind of redemption people like us can afford." I left without another word. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air was clearer now, lighter somehow. I stood by my truck for a while, looking back at the mill, that hollow giant that had stolen decades from my life, and yet still stood, stubborn as I was. Maybe that's what surviving really meant. Not being unbroken, just still standing. When I got home, Emily was waiting on the porch. Her eyes searched my face. "Where did you go?" "I had a conversation with someone who needed to say something," I said. "And?" I handed her the folder. She flipped through the papers slowly. I watched her expression shift from confusion to anger to disbelief. "He used me," she whispered. "All of it. The dinners, the proposal, the lies." I nodded. "He saw what he thought was easy money, but he underestimated who raised you." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. She just closed the folder and held it against her chest. "What do we do now?" "We live," I said simply. "We take what they buried, the truth, the land, the name, and we build something new." That night, she helped me clear out the attic. We found boxes of Mary's journals, old recipes, photographs from the early days of the mill. In one of them, Mary stood beside me in her apron, her hands on her hips, defiant as ever. On the back, she'd written in faded blue ink, "Don't let them forget where we started." Emily held the photo up to the light. "Grandma always knew, didn't she?" "She always did," I said. "She just waited for us to catch up." Weeks passed. The lawsuit threats faded into silence. The story about the Walkers never disappeared. It grew legs, traveled far beyond our small town. People started sending letters, former workers thanking us for speaking up, families who said our fight gave them courage. One even sent a photo of the mill's rusted gate with a sign hung across it. "Walker Foundry, built by hands, not money." Emily framed that photo and hung it in the living room. One evening, as the sun melted into gold across the fields, she came to sit beside me on the porch. "You know, I used to think our family story was something to hide," she said quietly. "Now, I think it's the best thing about me." I smiled. "That's what your grandmother wanted you to see." She looked at me, her eyes soft. "Do you ever think she knew how it would all turn out?" I chuckled. Mary always played the long game. She probably wrote half this ending before I even realized there was a story. We sat in silence for a while, the maple leaves rustling above us. I felt her hand slip into mine, warm and steady. The porch light flickered on, casting a soft glow across the old wood, and for the first time in years, I felt whole again. Not because we'd won, but because we'd remembered who we were. "I'm proud of you, Grandpa," she whispered. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart," I said. "You came back." She smiled. "I'm never leaving again." Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, faint and slow, like applause from the heavens. I glanced up at the darkening sky and whispered under my breath, "You can rest now, Mary. She's home." And for once, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive. The end. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button. Thank you for watching.